and welcome back from the break. From debut Australian filmmakers to one of the most influential filmmakers of his time, we have Rick Carlson, who is the son of the grandfather Charles Chevelle, who was integral at supporting Australia's film industry at a time when it could so easily collapse completely. Thank you, Rick, for being here today.
Thanks for welcoming me to the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, your grandfather, Charles Chevelle, was extremely influential in the film industry. I believe that his film Jeddah was the first Australian colour feature to be made in Australia.
That's correct.
Can you tell me a little bit about your grandfather?
Certainly. Well, look, my grandfather was born in southeast Queensland, originally wanted to study art in Sydney, but ended up getting involved in the film industry, and then from there went to Hollywood, and then came back and started his film career here in Australia. He had made some silent films in Australia before then and tried to pitch it to the American audiences, but then found, of course, that the sound experience had hit the screens in America and felt that it really was a bit of a shame that he had these silent films under his belt, so came back to Australia, made his first sound feature film here, and then continued.
So he was really persistent. He must have really loved it a lot.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Look, I think, you know, he was one of the pioneer filmmakers here in Australia, but his focus in making films was really to show the Australian landscape and the Australian stories, not only to Australia, but to the rest of the world.
Oh, wow. Now, with film, it's been rubbed off in all your family. I believe that your mother actually wrote a book about the life and times of Charles Chevelle, and you yourself have been heavily involved in film. Can you tell me what you're working on at the moment? Because I believe that you have some involvement in the History of Cinema Festival.
Well, certainly. in Toowoomba, the town that I live, is the Empire Theatre. Now, the Empire Theatre used to be the largest cinema outside any metropolitan city in Australia, and that was totally refurbished and revamped in the mid-90s. But it had shut down in 1971 as a cinema and was abandoned for many years. Well, now the Empire Cinema is, I guess they're celebrating their 100th anniversary of being a theatre, and they approached me and asked me whether I would actually put on a festival of film to celebrate the fact that they were 100 years old. So what I've done is I've put together about 5, I guess what I feel are fantastic films from each decade, from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s, to try and celebrate the fact that cinema was a part of the Empire Theatre.
Oh, wow. And what about for the future? I believe that you do open-air screenings yourself.
That's correct.
And you also want to take your gig on tour to remote rural communities.
Yes, well, for some time, I mean, I used to have a cinema myself in Toowoomba, which I ran for about 10 years, but with that, for 6 years, I was involved in presenting outdoor cinema to the parks in Toowoomba. But I've always felt for some time now that I wouldn't mind taking that out west or up north to some remote communities that otherwise wouldn't have that cinema experience.
Yeah, and I believe that your grandfather also had a lot of interest in filming about the indigenous communities and what was going on in that time. Is that feels like it's sort of part of you to do that as well?
Well, with my grandfather, I mean, naturally he grew up on the land and so understood the Indigenous people and their ideas and their stories, and so when it came time to using them within his films, he was always very respectful of their customs and their situation, and so I think that's why they also had a great respect for him, and he was able to get the best from them, and he made quite a few films which actually included them within his stories. For myself, I just feel that there's so many communities out west and that would actually benefit by having outdoor cinema, and I wouldn't mind taking it on the road. It'd be actually quite fun doing it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's when I just feel like it's just real life stuff, and sometimes truth is just the most interesting to watch, you know, especially with travelling to the outback with Australia and going of what's actually happening in those communities. So well done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, Rick is about to travel somewhere today. Are you going back to Toowoomba this afternoon?
That's correct.
Yeah. And do you have you lived there for quite some time?
I've been in Toowoomba for 35 years now. I moved to Toowoomba when I was 10 from Sydney, and basically have lived there, predominantly most of my life, but I have been involved quite heavily within the community with lots of different businesses. But the main business, I should say, for the last 10 years was the Icon Cinema, which I ran there, which culminated in running independent art house film, classic film society films, and it was a great part of my life.
Yeah. When did you actually start, when you decided that you were going to start doing this?
I think it was probably 1999 when I first decided that I wanted to start showing movies, and it was a cafe in town in Toowoomba which had this great gallery space up above, and so I decided by approaching the cafe owners whether we could show some classic movies once a month, and it absolutely took off. It was very successful, and I realised beyond the 2 years that I ran at the cafe that I should open up a cinema, so I opened up the Icon Cinema.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for being here. It's been absolutely splendiferous. And after the break, we're going to be going to John Adams, who is the Senior Communications Officer of Arts Queensland.